In 1970, a gallon of gas cost 36 cents. You could fill up a full-size Chevy Impala for about $7. A family road trip from New York to Florida, about 1,000 miles, would cost maybe $20 in gas. Today, the national average sits around $3.10 a gallon. In California, it's over $4.50. That same road trip now costs $150 or more. Gas prices have gone up roughly 9 times since 1970. But wages haven't gone up 9 times, and the way we think about filling up the tank has completely changed. Gas used to be something you barely thought about. Now it's a line item in the family budget that can shift by 50 cents in a single week. This is the timeline of gas prices in America, from 36 cents to $3 and beyond. And it's not just a story about fuel. It's a story about wars, recessions, pandemics, and the everyday cost of getting from point A to point B. Let's start at the beginning. In 1970, gasoline was one of those things Americans barely thought about. It was cheap, it was everywhere, and nobody worried about running out. That 36 cents a gallon was incredibly cheap, even by the standards of the time. When you adjust for inflation, it's about $2.90 in today's dollars. That's less than the cheapest gas you'll find anywhere in the country right now. America in 1970 was a driving nation. Big cars, big engines, and cheap fuel to feed them. The average car got about 12 to 14 miles per gallon, and nobody cared because gas was so affordable. Gas stations were everywhere, and they were full service. A guy in a uniform pumped your gas, checked your oil, and cleaned your windshield. That was just the standard experience. You sat in the car while someone else did the work. The U.S. was also producing most of its own oil at the time. Domestic production was near its all-time peak. America wasn't dependent on foreign oil in the way it would become just a few years later. And that sense of energy security kept prices stable and low. In October 1973, the Organization of Arab Petroleum Exporting Countries announced an oil embargo against the United States. The reason was American support for Israel during the Yom Kippur War. Suddenly, the oil that had been flowing freely into the country slowed to a trickle, and gas prices exploded. Gas prices nearly tripled in 7 years. But the price wasn't even the worst part. It was the shortages. Americans lined up at gas stations for hours. Some stations ran out of fuel entirely and shut down. Many states introduced odd-even rationing. If your license plate ended in an odd number, you could only buy gas on odd-numbered days. People got into fights in gas lines. Some stations limited purchases to 5 or 10 gallons at a time. It was chaos, a complete shock to a country that had always taken cheap, abundant energy for granted. Then, in 1979, the Iranian Revolution triggered a second oil crisis. Global oil production dropped again, and prices surged past $1 a gallon for the first time. By 1980, the national average hit $1.19, and in some places, it was even higher. The 1970s taught America a harsh lesson. Gas prices aren't just about supply and demand at the local station. They're connected to wars, politics, and decisions made thousands of miles away. The early 1980s were rough at the pump. Gas prices stayed elevated as the aftershocks of the oil crises lingered. But then something interesting happened. The market corrected itself. After the price shocks, consumers changed their behavior. People started buying smaller, more fuel-efficient cars. Japanese imports, Toyotas, Hondas, Datsuns, surged in popularity because they sipped gas instead of guzzling it. At the same time, new oil production came online from places like the North Sea and Alaska's Prudhoe Bay. The global supply increased, OPEC's grip loosened, and by 1986, oil prices collapsed. Gas dropped back below $1 in many places. For the rest of the decade, prices bounced between about 90 cents and $1.10. The panic of the 1970s faded. Americans went back to driving more, buying bigger cars again, and treating gas as an afterthought. But underneath the calm, the U.S. was becoming more dependent on imported oil every year. Domestic production was declining. The seeds of the next price shock were already being planted. The 1990s were a golden era for gas prices. Cheap, stable, and predictable. exactly what drivers wanted. For most of the decade, gas hovered around $1 to $1.20. In 1998, prices actually dipped below $1 in some states. Adjusted for inflation, that was some of the cheapest gas since before the oil crises. The global oil market was oversupplied, the economy was strong, and Americans responded in a very American way. They bought bigger vehicles. The 1990s saw the explosion of the SUV. Ford Explorers, Chevy Suburbans, Jeep Grand Cherokees. These trucks got 15 to 18 miles per gallon, but at $1 a gallon, nobody cared. This was also when the minivan became king of suburban America. Families drove more than ever. Road trips were cheap. Commutes were affordable. The era of stable gas prices made sprawl feel free. But the cheap gas of the 1990s was masking a growing vulnerability. The U.S. was importing over half its oil by the end of the decade, and the world was about to get a lot more complicated. The 2000s ended the era of cheap gas permanently. After the September 11th attacks, instability in the Middle East grew. The U.S. invaded Afghanistan, then Iraq. Oil markets got nervous, and gas prices started climbing in a way that felt different from before. Gas went from about $1.50 in 2000 to nearly $3 by 2007, and the increases weren't smooth. They came in jolts. A hurricane in the Gulf Coast, a refinery fire, a spike in global demand from China and India. This was also the decade when Americans first started hearing the phrase, pain at the pump. News anchors stood in front of gas station signs showing prices that would have been unthinkable a few years earlier. $2 felt expensive. $2.50 felt outrageous. People started thinking about fuel efficiency again. Hybrid cars like the Toyota Prius hit the mainstream. But most Americans were still driving trucks and SUVs, locked into a lifestyle that assumed cheap gas would last forever. It wouldn't. The summer of 2008 was the most dramatic moment in the history of American gas prices. In July 2008, gas hit a national average of $4.11 per gallon, the highest price Americans had ever paid. In California, prices topped $5. Crude oil surged to $147 a barrel. It felt like the price would never come back down. People changed their behavior overnight. SUV sales collapsed. General Motors reported massive losses. Carpooling surged. Public transit ridership hit record highs. Americans were genuinely panicking about the cost of driving. Then the financial crisis hit. The housing market collapsed. The stock market cratered. Demand for oil fell off a cliff as the global economy went into recession. By December 2008, gas had plummeted to $1.61, a 60% drop in 6 months. It was the sharpest swing in gas prices most Americans had ever seen. 1 month you're paying $4, 6 months later it's $1.60. The roller coaster left people dizzy and uncertain about what gas would cost next. After the crash, gas prices climbed back up through the early 2000s, settling into a new, higher normal. For the first half of the decade, gas hovered between $3 and $4 a gallon. Adjusted for inflation, 2012 was actually the most expensive year for gas in American history. $3.60 a gallon in 2012 was worth about $5 in today's money. Then came the American shale revolution. New drilling technology, particularly hydraulic fracturing or fracking, unlocked massive oil reserves in Texas, North Dakota, and Pennsylvania. U.S. oil production soared. By 2014, America was producing more oil than it had since the 1970s. The result? Gas prices dropped sharply. By early 2016, the national average fell below $2 for the first time in years. For a while, it felt like cheap gas was back. But the 2000s also saw a major shift in how Americans thought about fuel. Electric vehicles went mainstream. Tesla became a household name. Fuel efficiency standards tightened. And for the first time, a growing number of Americans were buying cars that didn't need gas at all. The pandemic era sent gas prices on yet another wild ride. In April 2020, oil demand collapsed as the world locked down. Gas dropped below $2 nationally. In some places, it was under $1.50. Oil futures briefly went negative for the first time in history. Producers were literally paying people to take their oil. Then the economy reopened, demand surged, and supply couldn't keep up. Gas prices rose through 2021 and exploded in 2022 after Russia's invasion of Ukraine disrupted global energy markets. By June 2022, the national average hit $5.02 a gallon, the highest recorded price in American history. Prices gradually eased through 2023, 2024, and 2025 as supply chains stabilized and domestic production hit record levels. The 2025 average came in at $3.10, the third straight year of declining prices. In December 2025, the national average even dipped below $3 briefly. But in early 2026, geopolitical tensions in the Middle East pushed crude oil prices back up, and gas climbed again toward $3.50 to $3.60 nationally. California and the West Coast remain above $4. The price of gas continues to be one of the most unpredictable costs in American life. And here's what makes the modern era so different. More Americans than ever have an alternative. Electric vehicle sales topped 1.3 million in 2024. For those drivers, the gas station sign out front is irrelevant. But for the roughly 270 million gasoline-powered cars still on the road, every 10-cent swing at the pump still matters. So let's take one final look at this timeline. In 1970, gas was 36 cents a gallon. You filled up your car for $7 and didn't think about it. By the end of the 1970s, oil crises had tripled the price and introduced Americans to something they'd never experienced: gas station lines and real energy fear. The 1980s and 1990s brought relief. Prices stabilized, dropped, and life at the pump went back to normal for a while. Then the 2000s brought volatility. The 2008 spike hit $4, and the pandemic era pushed past $5 for the first time. Through it all, one thing became clear: gas prices are never just about gas. They're about wars in the Middle East, hurricanes in the Gulf, oil wells in Texas, political decisions in Washington, and the daily reality of 200 million American commuters trying to get to work. The price on that sign at the corner gas station is one of the most visible numbers in the entire American economy. It's the first thing you notice on your way to work, and the last thing you check before a road trip. And for more than 50 years, it's been quietly telling the story of how this country runs. Literally. If you found this interesting, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more videos on how life in America has changed over time.